Good afternoon, Kurt Scheibel, Director of Pasco County Public Transportation. Calling the TBARTA TMC meeting to order. I have 1:31 on November 18th. We have roll call, please.
Am I here?
Yep.
We will start with Nina Elkin.
Oh, Janina Elkin with,
here.
She's here.
Here, yeah, it's the roll
Just
call.
here.
am I on?
Press the button.
Hernando County.
Now, you don't need to push the buttons. The microphones will be hot the whole time, so just need to say here, we're present.
Oh, present, I'm sorry.
Adelie LeGrand.
In Ms. LeGrand's absence, Scott Drainville, Chief of Transportation and Maintenance of Hart.
William Steele.
Jonathan Roberson for William Steele.
Kurt Scheibel.
Present.
Brad Miller.
Heather Sobush for Brad Miller, I guess.
Okay, and that does give us a quorum.
Okay, thank you. We have a forum today. I remind everybody to please silence your electronic devices, put them on mute so that we can proceed forward. And we're now at the public comment section. Persons wishing to address the board can do so in either of two ways. Email your comments to publiccomments@tbarta.com. No later than 30 minutes prior to the meeting start time, and your comments will be read in the record. Two, you can speak during the meeting by calling 1-267-866-0999 with access code 1-234-35-187630 30 minutes prior to the meeting. You will first speak to a staff member, then be able to provide public comment for a maximum of 5 minutes when recognized by the chairman. This public comment period will be extended for up to 30 minutes. Do we have any public comments at this time?
We have no public comment.
Thank you. One thing to remind everybody at PSTA, if we're visitors today, is you must wear a mask. So just remind everybody you have to have a mask on at all times, unless you're, I believe, eating or drinking. So just to give you a heads up. Beyond that, we'll go into consent agenda items. Does anybody have anything about the May or August meeting minutes? If no, then I will go ahead and entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion passes. And then we're on to 4 action items. If you did not know, I will not be able to attend future meetings, but I will be sending a substitute. Mr. James Flaherty will be my substitute. He is in attendance today. So if you ever want to meet my brand new employee who's been here been in his position about a month and a half, I encourage you to do so. I'm very happy, and the phrase, it's better to be lucky than good sometimes. I'm very lucky to have him on my team. So please welcome him to my team. But at this point, I'm going to start elections of Dnc officers, and we'll open the floor for nominations.
I'll nominate then Jonathan or Bill Steele, in that case, to be the chairman.
So you nominate the Manatee
Manatee
County representative. Is there any seconds?
Second.
Second, okay. Any other nominations? With that, I will call the meeting nominations closed and call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 I believe I have 3 ayes. All opposed, same sign. I believe the motion carries, and I believe I turn over the gavel at this time, do I not?
I think it starts with the next meeting,
Okay.
I believe. So
Then I will
you guys
continue
agree with
on,
that?
but congratulations. I tell Bill that he is now the new, either him or his alternate is now the new chair.
Okay, so question, so point of order, if it's whichever MCAT representative will chair?
I think I probably need clarification for that. So my thinking is that if you're not here, it goes to the vice chair. I think that's the first.
Because it would be myself and not Bill, to be frank.
Okay, so are you the primary then?
Yeah.
then he would be the primary, so it would be you then.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay.
But if you're not here, then it would go to the vice chair, which I think you're going to take nominations for now, right?
Thank you for the clarification. And on that note, I open it up for the nomination for vice chair.
Mr. Chair, I nominate, Ms. Heather Sobush.
Or PSTA representative? I don't even know what I am. I don't know if I'm the alternate. I have no idea.
You're on our list of the PSA alternate. Brad is listed, but Cassandra, and you was also at
Oh, okay.
But I believe you've attended most of the meetings that I've been to, at least for the last 2 or 3 years, so.
Yeah.
Heather Solbrush, we have a nomination for Heather Solbrush, from PSDA. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
And I open the second. Any other nominations? And I call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. I think I hit the gavel and I say our new chair is from Manatee County. I'm sorry, I don't have your name, so I don't see it up there. Jonathan?
Yeah.
Jonathan Wilkerson, and then Heather Solbush will be our vice chair, and that will take effect to meet on the next meeting. CSS corridor study resolution of support. So what we have here is an action item to vote on a resolution to support the study of the CSX corridor. Brian, were you going to give a quick briefing on that, if I'm not mistaken? So go ahead, please.
So before you is a resolution of support that we want to take to the TBARTA board. We're planning on taking it to them tomorrow. It doesn't look like we're going to have a forum, but we'll take it to them. This is a resolution of support that would direct TBARTA staff to conduct a assessment of the best uses of the CSX corridor. And when I say the CSX corridor, I'm not just talking about the Hillsborough piece. I'm talking about all of it, pretty much the entire Brooksville and Clearwater subdivision. This would be a mode agnostic look at the corridor. What I mean is there will be no assumptions going into it. One like that is going to be rail. We're looking at all possibilities. I mean, this is a corridor that this region has talked about for decades. There's 2 things at play here. The first thing is, Hillsborough County has long been interested in using the CSX corridor for some form of passenger rail. That's the first thing. The second thing, though, is CSX, as far as we know, has always indicated that, well, we're going to sell it to you. We're not just selling you the Hillsborough piece. It's all of it. So what's the best use of all of it? We know that Hillsborough wants rail, but what's the best use of the corridor, say, in Hernando County? We don't know. That's never been studied. FDOT has consistently said, we're happy to negotiate with CSX on the purchasing corridor, but before we do that, we have to know what the project is. And what's the planning study that we're pointing to that identifies what the project or projects are. And that's what this feasibility study is meant to get at. TBARTA will be funding the study. We're planning on using some of our 5307 funding to do it. We will have to do a budget amendment to move some of the funding we had in capital cost of contracting over to short range planning. But that is where the funding is going to come from. We are certainly going to work with both this committee, with the transit agency, and with the MPOs in developing the scope of work. We're not going to develop the scope of work in a vacuum, so we'll work with you. And so really what we're looking for today is just a vote of support from the committee, basically endorsing this resolution so that when we take it before the board, we can say CFC, our Citizens Advisory Committee and our Transit Management Committee both think this is a good idea for TBARTA to do. And I'll take any questions.
My only question is how far north and how far south?
On the map, maybe a little hard to, hopefully you can see it on the map, but the CSX corridor, that subdivision, goes up into Hernando County. It goes as far south, I believe it does.
Can we zoom the map
It does
in a little
cross
bit,
over
please?
into Nancy.
Can we zoom the map in a little bit, please?
See where they are in our county.
Because I think my understanding, if I'm not mistaken, is from Brooksville south, correct?
Right.
But doesn't CSX also go a little bit farther south than just ending at the Clearwater area, are we doing the other branches that are going out? Because I know it kind of goes somewhat east and somewhat south along the coast. Is that part of it is what I'm curious.
The two pieces that I'm definitely certain of what is actually CSX is the part that goes north up from Marysville, and the part that comes over in Pinellas. The other pieces that you see on the map, I need to get clarification on what exactly belongs to CSX, but I'm assuming any and all of the CSX owned right away within our 5-county region is something that we want to look at.
Because I'm curious, are we going all the way down into Manatee County? And are we looking at using that also? That just was more curious in how big of a scope are we looking at? I know there's some other meetings that are on the agenda. I believe you and I talked about this a while back. Just wanted to make sure I knew what the scope was.
The intent is to evaluate whatever corridor CSX owns in all 5 counties. So
Okay.
Manatee absolutely will be included,
That's a good limit. I guess.
even though you can't see it on this particular graphic. They will definitely be included in the study.
Sometimes I wish it, hops the bay a little bit, because I almost make it more feasible or enticing, viable. That's another good word. So
Aren't there a number of portions that are, and maybe just look at them and outrule them like right away, but that are very active and that like aren't at all viable from a CSX lens?
There are some, this is to my knowledge, there are some parts of the corridor that they use more frequently than others. So there potentially could be some parts of it that they absolutely don't want to dispose of at all.
Right.
Maybe it's a situation where they will dispose of it. However, they want to enter a shared use agreement to retain the right to operate along it. We're not sure, but that would all be part of what this study is about.
And forgive me if you already said it, do you already have funding to do the study?
Yeah, TBARTA plan on using some of the study through set money.
any other questions for Brian?
I guess what is the amount of the study, or have you had that figured out yet?
But I know you had a ballpark.
We're thinking it'll be roughly $2 million.
Will this also include like transfer stations or, where transit can fit into that type of service?
We would have to work with all of you and your MPOs to develop that scope of work. So if that's something that everybody wanted to put into the study, then we certainly could do that.
Well, correct if I'm wrong, though. I think it's more of a study is that what mode of transportation would work, or would it even work? Am I correct? It's a little bit higher level than getting down into the.
Correct. We're not going into it with the assumption that passenger rail is going to be the solution for all parts. I mean, when you sit, for example, when you get up in Hernando County, the numbers just may not be there. There may be some other use that would be a better use of that corridor. Maybe it's converting it into some sort of right way through BRT. Maybe it's a rail trail. Maybe it's something for autonomous vehicles. We don't know, but we're not going to just do it in the passenger rail.
And, well, the one thing I have to say is that when you look at the 41 corridor in Pasco, by the time we get to the point of going to something passenger rail, we're still talking 10, 20 years. And if you just look at the permitting in Pasco, what we are now along that 41 CSX corridor is going to be vastly different than what we are now. And so I think I feel it's a good study to at least figure out what the heck can we even do with it. And I think that's kind of maybe the 35,000 foot level that we're trying to accomplish. So we have a baseline starting, so we can go to FDOT and FTA and say, this is the project, this is what we're trying to do and accomplish, and then do can we make that work? And it's a good stepping stone, I think, to all the questions, concerns that have been coming up for the 5 years I've been here. So any other questions for Brian?
Yeah, Brian, do you know, does District 7, FDOT and or District 1 have rail staff? Do they manage the corridor in any way right now, like they do in D4, or is just offhand? And I'm asking, would they be part of the, if they are, they should be part of the study and
I do
scoping?
know district, I can't speak for District 1, but I do recall when I worked at District 7, they had rail staff that was focused for freight planning.
Okay, all right. I mean, I'm assuming they have some people that oversee some part of it, but maybe not, but it'd be interesting to know that. And secondly, I'm not sure what part of the rail corridor is there east, or is this just north-south? Is there anything coming from the Orlando region? That's CSX?
Yeah, that I don't know. I mean, I don't, but I'm looking at this map, I see rail line on there, but unfortunately, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's something that's all CSX, I don't know what I mean.
I guess my point is we've always heard Brightline was coming over at one point from Orlando, from maybe Disney, at least the airport stop. It'd be interesting to know what those plans are. And frankly, I don't know what rail corridor that is, if it's FBCs or did they plan on using the CSX. So it might be something that'd be helpful to know even for your board that there was other plans for passenger rail.
I have to say, when I last talked to FDOT, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but the impression I got is that they're also waiting to see what Brightline is going to
Okay.
do. I think it's right now, there's too many things in there. Just a point of order for the record, Mr. Grant came in from Hart and is now representing Hart in her spot. So, welcome. First meeting.
Good to see you.
But I know Brightline, there was even an article just recently from Brightline, they got some more right away or funding or something, and I'm anxious to see what they provide too.
Yeah.
Because to be able to, if we can connect with Brightline with the CSX, you go park somewhere and hit a rail all the way over to Disneyland and back, or even to the East Coast, that is that's viable. You start connecting, and now you start becoming just a one line to connecting to Amtrak, and now you're connecting to the next thing, and now you've got national connections.
Yeah. I was in South Florida when they implemented the first line between West Palm Beach and Miami, and I've seen it. They'll do it, and you know, it was kind of on their dime.
Yeah.
And so it's something to consider for the eastern part of the region, perhaps, that they have some kind of plan somewhere. So that's all I had.
Any other, just to bring you up to speed, we're talking about the support for the CSX corridor study resolution, and just asking Brian any questions we may have, and it's not that particular piece of paper, but if you have any questions for Brian, one last stand for anybody. If not, I'll entertain a motion for the support of the CSX corridor study resolution.
I'll make a motion in support of the CSX corridor study.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Resolution passes. Presentations. We now have a study, Randy Farwell coming up and providing a study on the regional mobility on demand. I'll give you some results of the study and going from there. So yes, right over here, please.
Come on over here. I'm gonna have you present from here.
Or you're gonna present from the other
You're gonna
side.
get to sit where I am right here, so hang on one second.
Excellent.
One. Make sure we get this thing, should be sharing the screen. Yep. Looks like it's. Yeah, it's trying to get you in a presentation mode here. But it's been a little. You get your slides up, let's make sure you're able to change them.
Try and put that one, and then we'll go from the beginning. I think not right there, it's the beginning, and I should do.
You're good? I think we can page through it, but I'm not changing. I'm sharing on this screen here. I was working earlier but here.
Did you?
Well, no, that's yeah. Trying to get you. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties here. For some reason the computer's being persnickety on me here. One second, I'm going to reload it here.
That's the version 2.
Yep, same one we put in there.
Okay.
So we can do this. Yeah, I think we're just about there. Hang on. Now you're in business. Very good.
All right, thank you so much.
Policy.
Thank you so much. All right, good afternoon. I'm Randy Farwell with Tyndall Oliver, and I'm happy to be here today. We're doing this regional mobility on demand feasibility analysis, and I've spoken with well, not each of you personally, but each organization in terms of the study. So I'm here today to give you a quick update on where we are, what the study's about, and I'm going to plan to go through this quickly, and then we can have a little discussion. So the purpose of the study is really pretty simple. We're looking at assessing the market demand and identifying mobility gaps within the Tampa Bay region. We're looking at assessing the operational feasibility for on-demand mobility types of service concepts, whatever that means in terms of different across the region, and then focusing on how those services would connect to the existing transit networks to improve access to mobility throughout the region. So just real quick in terms of our schedule and the different tasks. This is a little bit difficult to read. I will step you through it real quick, and then there's a little update, further update on the next slide. But basically, we've completed the data collection effort. We've engaged with each of the transit agencies to get an upfront discussion and understanding of what the project is about, and then we'll continue coordination with you all as we move through the process. We've completed the initial market analysis, identifying needs, identifying service and mobility gaps. And so today I'm really here to show you what we found initially and some of our thoughts on how this might translate into different types of services. I'm not here to say we have solutions, because really we have more questions than, based on the data, we have more questions, and we have ideas about how we might be able to use the information that we found in terms of developing different types of mobility solutions if they are relevant and feasible and of interest to you throughout the, for each portion of the region or each jurisdiction within the region. So a little bit more in terms of the mobility gaps. We've identified the mobility needs, the served and underserved areas, those gaps, and we've been engaged in the coordination with each of your organizations. We have not assessed market demand and feasibility yet. We're in the process of doing that. That's why I'm here today, so I can share what we know, get your thoughts, and then from there we'll develop concepts and determine whether or not it seems feasible. And if there are feasible projects in there, then we're going to move forward to develop an implementation plan and look at opportunities for creating pilots. So in terms of the initial findings and the market analysis, what we're seeing is essentially orientations or market needs in Hernando, primarily around Spring Hill, Polk County, that should not be Polk County, that's a typo, that's Pasco County. Dade City and Zephyr Hills, in Pinellas, sort of the Tarpon Springs area, but then other areas. So Pinellas is interesting because of the coverage you already have. And then in Manatee, we've seen markets out in the Lakewood Ranch area and in Bradenton. In terms of travel analysis, I have another slide next that gets into that, but we use the replica data to look at localized and regional travel patterns. So looking at desire lines, and this next slide will show you some of the desire lines. I'll come back to this slide as we get into questions, because we can look at
One
some things in
question,
more
so
detail.
what are you identifying here, that these are areas that are not served by what?
By your existing transit network. So what we've been looking for are, there may be transit there, but we've identified gaps where there's need and transit is not, if you think about fixed route, at least with a quarter-mile walk shed to the transit line, there are areas where you have need that goes beyond that buffer. And so that's part of what we're looking at here, is trying to identify any needs that are outside of the regular catchment area of the fixed route network because that would create an opportunity to help improve and increase coverage of service by extending beyond the buffer, or providing a service that connects into the transit network. So in terms of major desire lines, so these are what's showing on the map here. These are daily trips that we identified using replica that show over 5,000 weekday trips. And so they're largely, Spring Hill to Tampa, Wesley Chapel, Zephyr Hills area to Tampa and to St. Pete. And then the sort of West Shore to Pinellas and Tampa, that sort of arc, that movement as well. So there's strong orientation there. Some of the service concepts we've identified, because what we're showing on here, nothing really jumps out. The pieces that jump out are those long regional travel flows, right? So you can't do those flows by transit. We went through and plugged in a couple travel flows, and it would take like 4 hours for somebody to make the trip one way, right? By connecting. So that's not really a viable solution. So one of the ideas is there's definitely a market for commuter trips that can't be served by the existing regional transit network, combined regional transit network. So, a concept that we've come up with is sort of a regional shared ride type of service that could match up commuters from areas that are in proximity to each other, collect those commuters, and then get them to the locations that they're going to. So we need a bunch of common destinations and common origins to make those trips. So that's one concept. We have, like I said, we haven't done any detail. We're just coming up with concepts right now and sharing with you, because we want to get your response, your feedback. You don't have to give that to me today. But what I'm intending to do is make sure you get this presentation, and in particular the map link that's on the slide we just went over, and I'll go back to that, so that you can look at the different sets of data that we've identified, and look at those relative to each of your areas, so that you can you can provide some feedback in terms of ideas for types of services and areas that would be of interest to you in terms of creating a regional on-demand service and what that service might look like. The other, so I talked about the regional commuter concept, and that's the only one that's truly a regional point-to-point type of service, and it would be a shared ride type of concept. The other ones are really looking at, is there a way to provide a on-demand service, and maybe it's the software as a service platform, maybe it's an operation that is consistent across the region that provides that extension to your fixed route network. So it gets out into areas where your fixed route network doesn't reach and provides that first and last mile connection. In addition, if we're doing that, what we're finding is it makes sense to provide the opportunity to serve localized trips within a defined area. So because the first last mile connection is limited primarily to people that are transit users or may become transit users, but they're most likely they are existing transit users that are relying on a bicycle to get to the transit network. That first last mile connection is really an obstacle. So by providing the localized mobility within an area, what it does is it opens up the service to a larger population, a larger market of potential users who would also become transit riders. So just by the fact that they would use the service, you're able to capture the NTD rides. So what that does is it opens the market to a wider demographic range of potential riders. So your 15 to 24-year-olds, your seniors, commuters that currently commute, but now could use this to get the first last mile connection to an express bus. That looks like there's some opportunity there in the Wesley Chapel area, as well as coming in from Hernando. So these are really sort of the three concepts we've come up with in terms of potential applications. And like I said, these are concepts, and we're presenting these more in terms of these are the initial findings. We haven't decided or determined that anything is really feasible yet. So we're really looking for, at this point, generating some discussion and getting your input. I'm going to go back a slide and see if you guys have questions, and I can use the mapping tool we've got to maybe help show you some more information. And like I said, I don't expect to get 100% feedback today. I don't want that, because it's going to be, I'm putting you on the spot to think of everything that's important to you, and I don't really want you to have to do that. I want you to be able to take some time and look at the map, look at think about the concepts, and then email me back and let me know what your thoughts are, so we can then we can entertain those thoughts and get back with you and discuss them and see what we can put together in terms of some concepts that may work.
Well, the biggest feedback I'd have to say is I really enjoy having Dade City and Zephyr Hills in our county. You may want to change that. I know some commissioners may have some concerns about that and putting that up there.
Yeah.
The only one I had is you kind of made something, and then you said that it takes about 4 hours for someone to travel, like from Spring Hill down to Tampa. But mobility on demand, are you trying to, is this like for a commuter service? Because normally mobility on demand is not really a
So-
commuter service.
Yeah, so
And I'm just kind of curious on how you reconcile that, because I'm seeing mobility on demand as more of a, yeah, it's a long term, but if I go to Spring Hill at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's going to take me 3 hours. Traffic is going to dictate that, even no matter what service I'm driving. So I'm just kind of curious on what type of you're
Yeah, no,
looking for.
what I appreciate that. What I was referring to is the first last mile connection piece. That has merit, getting somebody connected to the local transit networks. But if my trip is, you know, from, I don't know, Spring Hill to St. Petersburg, and I'm trying to do that, and I'm providing a first mile connection to transit, then the connections the subsequent connections via transit become pretty impossible. It's not impossible in every case. There are some cases where you could do that, but it's going to take you, it's impractical. And that's what I'm saying, is that, you know, the idea here is to help provide a regional service that can be useful and attractive to people, and really get them out of their cars, get them into shared vehicles, and facilitate something that is going to be
I will say,
beneficial.
everybody up here wants to like to get people on there. Just, we're still working on I think the US 19 corridor. I know we have the other regional rapid transit corridors. But I agree that getting a regional rapid transit or a express type of service is something that would be very beneficial.
Maybe you could add, Randy, what does a regional shared ride service add or subtract from regional van pool? What's the difference?
It would be very similar to a regional van pool program.
Are you looking at the existing van pools? I suppose they're TBARTA run van pools, mostly. And I've seen a couple out of Manatee, for example, that are very regional. But I just hope sometimes I feel like I get 50 emails a day from the IT companies telling me, you know, what I'm not doing, but did regional van pool get something right, that get some things right, some markets right, that this type of service cannot? I'd be curious about that.
Yes.
In terms of grouping people together, because it's often a very individual service, and first mile, last mile, I get it.
Yeah.
But it's often, so if you have that data, there's a nice mapping software with, I've seen, I think from TBARTA staff on van pools, and they're, it's a lot. Because that's not always attractive either.
Right.
For whatever reasons, the whole kind of owning a vehicle thing.
Right.
But it might be nice to know the difference or the possibilities. And then I can tell you in our service area, that first mile, last mile thing could be potential there, but is it just to connect to the fixed route, or is your data just running it to our best trip generator in the county? You know, I'm not sure if you can get to the granular on the markets, but that might be helpful, because and then other examples of regional shared ride service might be helpful.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, you know, that's the best thing I can really compare it to, is a regional van pool service. But in this case, it may be that you own the vehicles. TBARTA may own the vehicles, and it may it may be another version of that, another evolution of that. But we're looking at really sort of maybe on-demand requests that sort of, there would have to be some underpinning of regular riders, so that you have the service demand to support the supply of the services, but there, you know, the ability to sort of not so much on a whim, but sort of on a whim, request a ride and get connected to the vehicles. You may be able to make it more attractive, so it's not so prescribed. Because one of the problems with the van pools or car pools is you kind of need to be, your pool's got to be together every day for the most part, right? For it to work. You don't have to have everybody in the pool there, but the ability to make it attractive and reliable enough that you can connect people through this non-existent service that's kind of like a van pool, may be there. Now, we haven't studied it. Like I said, we're just trying to, we're spitballing concepts at this point based on the findings we've uncovered and looking at primarily the replica, localized and regional travel data.
And just to add, I hope you can also look at some of like the Title VI areas and some of the service areas, because we found in a recent study that the fixed route system isn't enough there. There's issues like after school daycare stops that folks really want. Could you throw that in?
Right.
If I could get that trip out of the way, then I could take, and then drop me off at the station, I'd take your bus.
More of a feeder type of system.
But just almost a little bit of the old job access, reverse commute stuff. It's not just the poor old commuters living an hour and a half out.
Yep.
It's something nearby that fixed route can't always get.
Right.
So I hope to see some of that and.
Right, and
And all
that's
different-
that's precisely why, I've described this at the one level, sort of this regional carpool or van pool concept, right? That's more an evolution of traditional van pooling. But then at the other level, that's that first last mile connection to the transit network, as well as that if we're doing that first last mile connection, I mean, basically, if we're making the investment into doing first last mile connections to the regional transit networks, it probably makes a lot of sense, and we would get a lot more riders if we provide localized service, which becomes essentially a service that's serving markets that are outside of the immediate reach of the transit network, but are close enough to be connected to it. And that gets to your point, Jonathan, is where I have high demand neighborhoods, which generally translate to poor access to mobility. If I can get a on-demand service that's serving those needs, which could be, I want to get from my house to the grocery store, or get to childcare, or whatever the case may be, get to whatever the case is, then I have a much larger market of potential riders that are going to be attracted to the service. And you're building a bigger market, bigger interest in the service, and it may be more successful than if we've got too narrow of a focus. The other part we're trying to balance here, though, is how much of this becomes a localized service and how much of it is a regional service, right? And the question is, can the regional service also be providing localized service, not competing with the local transit networks, but enhancing the local transit networks? And that's really, to me, that's the piece that is really important, is we can come up with the concepts for how we fit them together, and then how they become useful across the region with your transit agencies is really critical. So, and the interesting thing is each county is very different. So, what we found, for example, in Pinellas County is there are very few areas where we have high need that aren't already served. And so in the case of Pinellas County, and what I mean by aren't already served, the half mile or quarter mile or half mile buffer around the transit network covers pretty much all of the areas that pop up as high need. So in the case of Pinellas, it's really sort of those trips between Hillsborough and Pinellas, and trips, going north. So, that's what we're finding in Manatee. You have good coverage. We identified certain areas where between your route network, there are some gaps And the question is, does it make sense to try to serve some of those gaps to connect people with the on-demand service, to connect people where we're finding most of the orientation though is sort of going further east from where your network operates today. And there seems to be a very, a pretty strong demand going to Bradenton. Now, is everything going to Bradenton? I don't know, because most of these are the desire lines that you see on the map aren't necessarily a point to a point. They are more, they're looking at the centroid of some level of demand between two areas. So, so I don't know if, I've spent longer than I intended talking about this. I can either show you, let me just show you what the,
Before you move on to that, I guess,
where'd you go?
Kurt,
There you
I'm
go,
sorry.
Kurt. Yes,
I'm
you're
confused.
there, Kurt, but your voice came from
I
there.
understand. I'm confused because you keep jumping from a micro level of transit to macro level to a regional level. And it almost sounds like your scope is so broad that it's very difficult to understand what's the end goal you're looking for. And because for me, a first mile, last mile makes sense in certain parts of the county, but not for other parts of the county, where like in Pinellas, first mile, last mile might be a staple, or even in Tampa Bay for Hart. But I can tell you, first mile, last mile in Hernando, like in some areas of mine, it would be not very productive or very expensive.
Right.
And for your area, you're like you have some areas that are like, you have a lot, and then you go and you have no one. And then you talk about micro. The other thing is that my concern is that has this been done somewhere else? In a previous life, I had 13 counties in Texas, and we did rural transportation, almost like what you're saying,
Right.
because we did serve San Antonio. But when you're talking about a county that takes 5.5 hours, just normal freeway driving, trying to get from one side to another, and serving a county that honestly has a population less than Spring Hill, the whole county has more than 1,000 people. There's a lot of different things, and I'm just confused on what are you actually trying to achieve? Are we trying to do a regional transportation where we can actually service some of these cross-county trips that need to be done, or what? And when I was trying to track what you were all, you went from here up to here and back down to here. I was really having difficulty understanding that.
Yeah.
And what are you trying to achieve? So what is the actual goal of your study?
Yeah.
That would be the thing I would want to know.
Yeah, so that's great. And you're right. I have talked about the regional and the micro and the mac and the in-between. And that's because the purpose of our study is to look at the potential for using on-demand mobility types of service concepts to serve demand within the region that is either first, that is there potential to serve regional trips that cannot be served by transit right now. All right, so those ones are generally either a connection like from Wesley Chapel to the 275X or whatever that.
Before going into detail, I just want to know what the overall scope is, not individual examples. What is the overall goal of it? Because you had me going and you started getting into details again. Keep it at the higher level for me.
Higher level is to identify, are there applications for on-demand mobility within the region to provide mobility in areas where we're not able to serve it with the existing network.
Okay, thank you.
And so you're welcome. And so to do that, we just kind of identify that looking at the needs and the travel patterns, we've identified there are basically three opportunities at a high conceptual level. One is trying to make those regional connections, the big connections, extending the local fixed route network to serve, through first mile, last mile. And then also the concept of, well, if I'm doing that first mile, last mile, does it make sense? And where are the areas where we have high need that are not being covered by the fixed route network or are being underserved? So where are those gaps? So that's really, that's the scope here. The intent is really, it's an exploratory study. We're trying to identify whether or not there's a there. Is there are there needs that aren't being served today? Yes, absolutely. Are there opportunities to serve them with on-demand services? It looks like it. What do those services look like? That's what we're trying to figure out. And then the next step is that feasible, right? And so that's where we are today, and that's why I wanted to share it with you.
Okay.
I know it is confusing.
Does anybody else have any questions? Go ahead.
I do. I don't know if my mic is on.
Yes.
You hit the button.
No, it's on.
It's
I
on.
think they're all
Well, it's
on.
blinking. I don't know how it's blinking.
That's what I'm saying. Hers is
Blink
blinking.
Mine is blinking.
Again.
That's what I did.
Maybe needed to reset.
He has to go do something back there.
My apologies. So I do have a question. So you mentioned what your overall scope is, which is to identify where there's some gaps. So then I'm curious, what was the next step in your methodology? You identified the gaps. Did you look to see, based on these gaps, what's the appropriate level of service that should be implemented? Or are you just looking at it, there are these gaps, and now we're going to see if microtransit is the solution? I'm just trying to discern between a recognition that, yes, there are gaps, and we probably may need to have more fixed route service, or is it there are gaps, and now we're going to try to see if we can use microtransit to fill the gap?
It is, it is a little bit of both, right? We're not supposed to design your transit networks, right? So we're just identifying gaps where they exist, and then we'll come up with some recommendations for, how those gaps that could be served. And in this case, we're really focusing on on-demand mobility to see if that can be something that would have a place within your transit network. And I know you're already doing that. In some cases, you've been working on those similar types of solutions. But that's again where we're trying to not play in your sandbox, right? But try to identify a set of strategies that can be beneficial and applied at the regional level that work hand in glove with the local transit agencies.
Okay, so thank you for that response. So I have another question, and my apologies because I'm, I guess, the last one to the table, literally and figuratively. So how far along are you in the scope? Is there an opportunity, and maybe the rest of my colleagues here have done this already, but is there an opportunity for us to review the scope and ensure that what you're moving forward in doing is something that would be beneficial to us? Because I can say just from what I'm hearing thus far, it would be beneficial to me to have a better understanding of, okay, these are the gaps, and then based on a hierarchy of service that could be implemented, these are the types of services that would be best suited for this type of gap, and then narrowing it down to, okay, and in these, and I would assume in these minority of cases, on demand is the best solution. But I would venture to say that in most cases, the best solution is not an on-demand service. So again, I don't know what the overall intention is of the scope, but if there is an opportunity to maybe look at it and see if there's something of value that can come out of it. It's just hard to, I would say, wrap our minds around how a regional on-demand service would work.
Right.
It doesn't seem like there's a lot of value in that, at least from what I'm gleaning thus far.
Right. No, that's I understand. And we did start out, or the first thing we did was we met with representatives from each of the transit agencies from each of the jurisdictions and had the discussion, went through the scope, and For Hart, it was Justin and Chris. Like, Chris, you were on, right? On the call? I think you were on the, no, you weren't on the call. So it was Justin Willits was on the call from Hart. I will say that this is where we're, you know, it's an ambitious study in the sense that we're looking at a very large region and we're trying to identify a way that we might be able to improve mobility within the region in a partnership with the local transit agencies. And so that's where, you know, I agree completely, and that's normally what we do. So the work we're doing similar, now we're not doing anything that's quite like this. So this is a little bit of a unique study. But for example, we're developing on-demand mobility solutions for Cincinnati and working with SORTA for, you know, and Metro to create overlay districts for their fixed route network to serve areas that they either are not serving currently with their fixed route network due to whatever the reasons, or they are, so there's a full gap between need and service, or there's areas that are being underserved. So they may get a couple express trips in the morning and a couple in the afternoon, but the rest of the day there's high need and no service. And so we're working with them right now to design those, identify those areas, design the actual on-demand services that would serve each of those areas. And that becomes part of a new Go Metro family of services that they would then operate.
Right, and I think that is a great example that you use for a couple of reasons. One, I've done work for SORTA, so I'm very familiar with their service. Two, you focused on a study that's focused on one transit agency.
That's correct.
And, you know, knowing Cincinnati, they have some geographic boundaries with the river, and then, you know, so it makes it a little more manageable in looking at that area to do exactly what you said, find opportunities outside of their fixed route service where you'd have on demand. In your study that you're doing here is for an entire region.
Correct.
With multiple transit agencies, with several different travel demands, lots of different markets. It just seems like the scope is flawed. I have not read it, so I'm premising it with maybe there's an opportunity for us to, if it's permissible, to take a look at the scope as a leadership group for us to provide some feedback on, is this really going to add value to our individual organizations? And then working with you and your team to find a way that we can get something of value out of this effort. Otherwise, what could happen is you complete the effort and you have a great report and it sits on somebody's desk and we say, you know, thank you for your time, and it doesn't really add any value. And I don't think that any of us here wants that.
Go ahead, Heather.
I guess what I think I mentioned this when we met, you know, I haven't read the scope either. There's a lot of on-demand programs out there today. We have 4 in Pinellas County. There was previously an on-demand regional service that USERV was operating. I know you guys know about that because you're doing it. And then the funding went away. So does the study going to look at best practices? There's a number of reports by Shared Use Mobility Center and other places about all these kinds of services. So, you know, are you combing through those to see if there's any regional pilots that have been done?
Yeah, this is kind of unique, and we talked about it when we were, you know, when we initially were exploring the idea that we're, you know, it's unique because we're doing it for TBARTA, right? TBARTA is looking at trying to improve mobility within the region. So the question is, are there some opportunities to provide a service that can be applied regionally. That's one question right there is, can it be applied regionally? And what does that mean? Is it funded regionally? Is it funded by TBARTA? And it's a service that is applied regionally that supports the local transit networks? Is it a service like that? And that's why, I don't have solutions for you today because, we're in the process of doing the analytics, the data analytics and looking at what's out there. And there are needs at 3 different levels. And the question is there some way for us to come up with a solution that, that seems viable? If it is, then we can look at the feasibility of that. We're not there yet. And,
But are you looking at existing programs like in the
yeah,
region?
absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
Because some of them may be applicable, like our Direct Connect program, if that was in another county, you connect people into the express bus route network. It doesn't have to be a full door-to-door on-demand trip necessarily.
Right.
I just want to just kind of echo that I think the scope is really large. Especially when you start talking first mile, last mile, I mean, just within my county, that's totally different things, but focusing on a regional service, because first mile, last mile, I think you kind of briefly said that maybe you're just helping us, but when it all comes down to it, it comes down to what can we use to go to our boards or our committees and this is what we want based off the study we're pulling out. And then how do we fund it? And that's, that's where, when you get down to it, that's what, if we're actually doing this, what, there's a gap here, this is what it's providing, this is what we need to do. That's what's, the bottom line for us. I mean, I don't mean to put it any other way. I think it is a good thing. It's a great, I can't tell you how many studies that Pasco County has done that has maybe sat in a corner and we're starting to dust them off and looking at them now. But that is not saying it was a bad thing. It's just that we need to go forward with an action, especially if we're doing regional something. Let's look at what's out there and what can we do? I know there's already the RRT for on the west side of all these of the region, and we're starting one for the east side of it. Other way around, I'm sorry. East side, there's one already going on with the up and down 75, and then we're starting one for US 19, that corridor too. And I think it's part of what you're already talking about, but there's other things you can be looking at. But I do think though that's why I was confused. It's like you're going all the way to different things. So any other questions for the gentleman, or did you have something else you want to
I was
present?
just
Or
going to
David, would you
offer
like to
some
say
more
something?
clarity about where this all originated. And it was, a question about whether a mobility on demand service could be used in a regional platform, with the concept of it acting potentially as like a feeder service to connect people from one county to transit service in the adjoining county.
Yeah.
That's where
I remember that discussion.
that's the idea that initiated all this. Microtransit, typically it operates in a zone. You have to identify a zone. And we were wondering, are there zones that cross county lines that might make sense for this sort of an application to get people from Pasco County to Hart's network, or vice versa, people from Hernando to Pasco's network? That was the initial concept. And then all these additional questions started coming out of the analysis of the data that they were connecting.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes.
Any other questions for the gentleman, or did you have some more to present, sir?
No, that's.
I do not believe this is an action item, so we'll move forward.
I actually have one quick question. Are
Oh,
you
go
going to
ahead.
send out this report so we can see what these gaps you've identified are?
Yeah, actually, you should get the PowerPoint. There's a link, map link, interactive map link. So you can actually go through and look at the different findings. So I don't know if I can get this on the other screen, but
You can just send out the link or the PowerPoint. That'd be great.
okay, yeah.
Thank you.
So you will, did you send that out? Okay, so.
Are you presenting this to your board? Are you presenting this to your board?
I believe you work for Ted Oliver, correct?
What's that?
No, I said, are you presenting this to the TBARTA board?
Not tomorrow.
No,
Okay, I just wondered if you relay some of our comments about just kind of the scope and maybe refocusing it.
I'll just reiterate it. If you don't identify maybe the problem, the need, the markets, the reasonableness of the distance of what we think are markets.
Right.
You know, what does the public sector owe people? Do they owe them an hour taxi ride? I don't know.
right.
Is the commuter network a little short in the region? Be fair, maybe we don't have, we don't have the managed lanes like we did in South Florida. That's a taboo subject from whatever.
Yeah.
But I think be careful what you promise. It's not promise, but identify as a problem, because personally, I don't know if I'm owed all the transportation options in the world where I chose to live. And there's some, I'll be most interested to see your first mile, last mile analysis in my service area, because that counts when I know where my fixed route system ends. But yeah, how much do you owe to a sprawling county and region reasonably? So I hope the report can kind of balance that, because that's what a private tech company will tell me. Hey, look at all this growth. Where are you? And then you get gated community after gated community. I don't know. I'm already going through this in Manatee County. So
Yes.
the elected officials, the sticker shock is something usually. It's like, and
Yes.
then you get into all sorts of other debates about what other modes cost. And so I just hope it's balanced and sober
Yes.
in its expectations on
Well, and I totally agree with what you're saying, and I'm glad you brought it up, Jonathan, because that's what I said at the outset. I'm not here with any answers today. I'm telling you, we started into the study, we analyzed the data, and we have lots of questions. And so, this was an opportunity to come to you guys, come back and tell you what we're finding and get your response. What I like I asked, take a look at I try to explain what what we set out to do, what we found. It just generates lots of questions. I have the same questions about whether or not, I see markets. I just don't know if they're markets that we can realistically serve, or if it's something that we should be serving, right? So, I'd like to get you guys to take a look at the presentation and click on the map link, and there's a whole series of layers, map layers, and you can drill down and zoom into places and see what's happening in your area, see what's happening across the region. And I'd really appreciate it if you send me your feedback and your thoughts, because at this point, what we want to do is we need to have some recommendations that we come up with, and whether that is, we've looked at it, and yes, there are needs, and no, I'm not sure that we have a realistic or feasible solution to serving those needs. Or we're going to have to, yes, there are needs, and we have to zoom in, and those needs may really be more localized needs. And if that's the case, then, is it a TBARTA responsibility? Is there a relationship there to help solve that need? And, and that's a different question, right? So, so your feedback would be really super helpful.
Okay, thank you. Any other last chance? Any questions? If not, I'm actually gonna, with the committee's concurrence, I'd like to move up to adding to value to TMC before we go into our committee members update. If there's no one has any problems with that, I think that'll be a good discussion before we go into our updates. Brian, I believe you're going to talk about some things, so we'll go ahead and
Sure,
talk about
thank
the adding value to the TNC. If everyone, make sure you have your piece of paper that you handed out earlier.
This is meant to be an open discussion. Dave and I were very interested in trying to find ways to add value to the TMC. The TMC, the Transit Management Committee, is created to assist and advise the TBARTA board. And so we're looking for ways, how can the TMC be of more value to the board, and vice versa? How can the TBARTA board be more value to your agencies? Presentations are great, but we travel long distances. We're all busy. When we come together as a committee, we want to make sure that we have an agenda that has a purpose to it. For example, the resolution that you took a vote on, that is something that has a purpose to it. We're looking for other ways that we can instill value in this committee so it's a good use of all of our time. Like I said, it's an open discussion, but I'll kick it off with something Dave and I have just recently been talking about. Our board on many occasions has asked staff, why aren't we, meaning TBARTA, doing anything? Because they don't see us operating any service. We do have a transit development plan, Envision 2030. That plan identified both short and long-term regional transit improvements, and it was made with input from the county transit agencies. As a point of reference, the chair's coordinating committee, well, I guess now they've changed their name to Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance and the TMA Leadership Group. They have an unfunded priority needs list. And every time the TMA Leadership Group or the SCTPA meets as a board, that list is front and center on their agenda. There's no reason why TBARTA could not have a regional unfunded short-range transit needs list and long-range transit needs list, and it's on the agenda of every single TBARTA board meeting. And there's no reason why this committee cannot have input to what that list is. Like I said, this is what's in the TDP. We could refine it with input from the TMC. And then it falls back on our board members, particularly the ones who are county commissioners, to go and help find funding for those regional projects. And I think the thought is, like, we have this list, and over time, we try and pick off project after project as we can. And like, I'm trying to look for an example. Let's say for an example, the Route 19 that goes from Pasco down into Tarpon Springs, so it would then fall on the TBARTA board members from Pasco and Pinellas to go and find money to do those service improvements that were identified in the TDP. And maybe it results in an interlocal agreement between the agencies, between the county. And even though TBARTA is not operating the service, it's still you guys operating it. It's a win for TBARTA because TBARTA was the forum that these improvements were identified, prioritized, and eventually brought to fruition. That is something that would not have happened otherwise if TBARTA did not exist. So that's just one idea that I want to put before this committee, is something this committee could do to provide value to the TBARTA board. But we can certainly have, like I said, I want this to just be an open discussion on, your thoughts on, how the TMC can better serve its function to the board.
Anybody have any questions? Comments?
I'll start. Last summer, we were pursuing at MCAT a 20-minute service upgrade to our Route 99, which happened to be in the regional TDP. And kind of quickly, TBARTA staff helped put together a resolution of support, which the TBARTA board approved. And so, in my opinion, when FDOT District 1 saw that, it added some weight to the grant application, which is funded. That 20-minute service starts December 4th. So there's a couple angles on that I'd like to see. I think you'd want this list and maybe your TDP to include some of the corridors that are important to us and the PO, our top project needs. And maybe some east-west corridor in Manatee County that doesn't hit another county, but it's part of the core system that feeds the regional system. We kind of had a priority corridor list like this in South Florida. So it's not to, that was more through an MPO-led type of committee like the other one you mentioned. Suncoast, is it now, or?
Yeah, now they
Yeah.
call themselves the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance. It used to be the Chair's Coordinating Committee, but that's now the new name for
But I
it.
think one of the best things you could do, and then maybe my board member is selling our top 5 route needs all the time. I won't lie. And at least 2 or 3 of them would be regional in nature, in my opinion. There'd always be a couple local ones. Maybe that's another story, but I think you got to make this to where DOT staff might even be invited and involved from both districts. The fact is it's about money. And
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
it's about money.
Yeah.
And it's about programming and
Right.
DOT District 1's been very supportive of transit and seemed to pay a lot of attention when TBARTA was a little bit involved.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of the needs are things we would operate. That I think that's fine and you acknowledge that, but MPOs, it looks like the MPOs planned the trip money for the region. In South Florida, we were able to get trip money for new buses and commuter services. So maybe there's a way what we do here can also get to that committee to maybe get on trip funding list. I haven't talked to Dave about that at our MPO, but I guess what I'm saying is in a way, you got to make it relevant for the transit agencies too.
Yeah.
And acknowledging our top needs, even if they're included in your annual TDP updates or in some kind of network. As you said, always have a funding list, a needs list. But and most of the time you're going to get the highest ridership needs list from us.
Right.
And
When
these
you
other
use
agencies-
trip funding in South Florida, I can't remember.
For buses.
Can trip only be used
for
for
commuter
capital?
buses.
Can it be used for operating? Do you know?
No.
Oh, so that's the
No,
problem. That's the
no, what-
problem we consistently are
What
running
was used for
into.
operating was toll revenue.
Okay.
And I know that exists in the region too. So I'm just saying, why not?
Yeah.
This is the place you can do it. There's no other, I can't do it at 5 different MPO meetings.
Right.
So that's a thought. To me, that's relevant and it helped us with the Route 99, which is a 2-county route. And, but if you make this funding needs connected to the annual work programs, discretionary grants, and that would help.
Yeah.
So it also the way you develop your TDP might have to address, like I said before, a few other needs that are just critical for each agency. Hope I'm not speaking for everyone, but I guess I am. There's got to be some money and some nod to what each transit agency's priorities are. Otherwise, you'll have a board member from my county may be getting confused. So this is actually a decent start, and it helped us on Route 99 on the record,
Yeah.
but I think there could be more.
Yeah,
Our
I mean,
Route
we'd
6
certainly be
our
open-
Route 6 Cortez Road is a major east-west corridor. We'd like to go for a grant for that next. It's in our TDP. And then I think when FDOT and, D1 and Tallahassee sees it's important to another regional body, then it gets some attention.
Right.
So, just a thought, we even had FDOT staff sat on the MPO version of the TBARTA committee in South Florida, FDOT staff, and voted. If this is just transit agencies, maybe that won't work, but there's some good staff at FDOT and quite frankly, some funding that could be channeled towards a very, concise document and set of needs from each agency.
Yeah, I was just going to elaborate on Jonathan's comments, and I appreciate you offering that suggestion because I had a similar idea about if TBARTA could obtain a list from you all of what your priorities are, whether they're projects or service improvements or you name it. And the reason that thought popped into my mind was, and I was kind of sharing this with Adelie the other day. I was in Tallahassee a couple of weeks ago, just doing the typical round and talking about TBARTA things. And while I was up there, a couple of the legislators asked about HART's maintenance facility project. And fortunately, I knew enough about it to be able to confirm that it is in fact a real need. And they do need to replace that facility and they need money to do it. I know that PSTA has the Clearwater terminal downtown that they're trying to replace. I know that you guys are trying to expand your electric bus fleet. I know Hart is doing an arterial BRT project, but I don't know a lot of other projects or service improvements that the rest of you are doing. If we were able to compile a list that we could have in order to help advocate for these improvements or services that you're trying to make, that would be helpful to us, I think, to help you.
So along those same lines, I thought the MPOs back when we met at USF used to come to these. I remember seeing Beth and some others. I think I went to them when I worked at the MPO. Do they have a separate meeting like this?
When you say come to you mean come to these meetings?
TMC.
There's a little bit of, okay, I probably need to explain. The TMC used to be, these meetings used to be combined with another group called the TAG, the Transit Advisory Group. That was a group that was specifically created to provide input to the TDP. The TDP is done, so there's really that group doesn't really meet anymore. The TMC is an actual, for lack of a better term, official TBARTA, a permanent TBARTA committee. The TAG was a temporary committee set up to help out with Envision 2030.
But if we had them come, even if they're non-voting members, or just try to get their engagement, because they develop the priority lists that DOT uses to fund projects. And so while we do have other priorities that aren't necessarily on their list, that is the list that's most likely to be funded in the next 5 to 10 years. And all of our really, really high priority projects are on there now. Our solar is not on there, but we do have bus replacements, including electric buses and infrastructure on that list. And we are getting some STP funds for that. And just being on that list is what we have to be in their tip to get federal funding. So I feel like your list is trying to focus just on the regional projects, right?
No, well, two different lists.
Okay.
I think that the list Brian started the conversation with was related to the regional TDP. And that would be for TBARTA's, board purposes to keep them aware of what the regional projects are and, how they're prioritized. But I think the list that Jonathan started talking about and that I, continued with was a list of your local projects.
That are on your TDP, the list that are on
Yeah,
your TDP.
It's really TDP and
TDP, each of us have a list.
And frankly, I wouldn't mind seeing the top 5, 10 needs, even a little mini TDP presentation from everybody. I'd like to know just, oh, I've seen that before. You need a garage? That's a huge deal. And you never know who you'll talk to. I've been there. So that if we're all in the same script, and never speaking differently about each other's needs, that's a great start, I think.
Just for me, I think a little bit more one-on-one, Dave, would help too, coming up and talking to us directly, or vice versa, coming down to see you directly. I know with COVID, other than some maybe a couple of Zoom meetings, hey, how you doing? That's going good before they start. Maybe beneficial in knowing what our needs are on moving forward. Just to be, semi-humorous, we're about to blow up our TDP and start basically from scratch. So, and I mean, back from the whole system all the way up from the ground. So my needs right now is we're still determined. But I do agree with what you're saying, and that if you're at Tallahassee and you said, hey, Hart needs a new garage, PSK needs a new building, Manatee's looking to get some more buses for another route. Pasco County, they're trying to expand their biggest route. They're trying to double the number of buses.
Transfer station,
No.
the transfer station, we're right now,
Well, you're also talking about doing an express bus service they're expanding express bus service to expand their reach across the county. Those type of things, I think, just start the conversation at Tallahassee, and who knows what may happen. You may get your And all of a sudden now you have a,
And
$500,000.
yeah, and on that note too, knowing that our list of wants, or what we're gonna do, a project, you might notice that I might have the same list or something that is related to Pasco, so where we can work together or wherever we go. So I think that that's something that you guys need to be aware of, where we wanna go, the direction that we're taking, so. And a meeting 101 maybe, yeah, and then bring
Mhm.
everybody on the, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's, communication always doesn't hurt type of thing, and I think I said that really poorly, but, keeping the communication flows out would help a lot. Sometimes as a smaller group, it seems like that we have a small voice, but I think that voice is can be still heard and move forward in the regional, aspect. Any other questions on this? I do think it's a great idea, Brian, coming up with 4 or 5 items from our tip or our wants list that we can start bringing to the BARTA board and moving forward on. So, any other questions for Brian or Dave?
I have one question. So for this list of short-term improvements, is it only focused on service improvements, or can you put capital projects on here, like a heavy maintenance facility?
In the TDP, it was just focused on service improvements.
Okay, thank you.
And I do want to thank everybody for their inputs on this, because I do think that this body can provide some great ideas to the board to help them move forward on what, because when it all comes down to it, we're the ones who have to take when I say us, it's all of us in this room have to take what's going on and take that idea and actually put rubber to the road. And so having us here to help do that would be great. And thank you on this, Brian, moving forward and making it a better voice for both our systems and TBARTA. So last chance for questions for Brian? Not. We'll go on around the room and do the committee member updates. And Heather, I'll let you start off. You have anything?
I don't think I have anything major to share today.
Okay.
You want me to go next?
You're, might as well, you're right.
I was
around
hoping I was
54.
gonna, learn from one of you to see how this works. Heather, you let me down.
I actually wasn't sure either how much to share.
Heather let me down
As
here.
much as well as you would like.
So I will say that, I'm happy to be here today. It's my first time physically being here. I think I was on one of the Zoom meetings, so looking forward to future engagement with you guys. The other thing is that earlier this week, we did have a State of Heart event where we shared with our colleagues and stakeholders some of what Heart is focusing on. And, I would just give a quick synopsis. Overall, we've all been impacted by COVID, and we're trying to find our ways forward while still providing great customer experience to our community. I can share that Heart. I know in the sheet, it doesn't say that we have any short-term improvements. So I'm going to get with you, Brian, afterwards to update this. I'm unsure of where, who you engaged with prior, but we have approximately 40 routes, and I would say 3/4 of our routes have a frequency of around 60 minutes. And I will state again that that is not great service, and we recognize that. We did have to make some adjustments to our service because of demand coming out of COVID, and recognizing that we have around half of our ridership. But that is definitely going to be a focus area for us at Heart, to find ways that we can take those routes that are at 60-minute frequencies and better those. So that's definitely one thing that we're focused on in the short term. In addition, we do need a new heavy maintenance facility, right? So to go from, having, several routes, I think I said 3/4, but I think it's really 2/3 of our routes are at 60-minute frequencies. In order to even make those 30-minute frequencies, let's say, doing the basic math, we have to increase the number of buses we have and also increase the number of operators we have to provide that service. So that's another reason why we do need a heavy maintenance facility. Outside of the fact that it's past its useful life, we don't have the capacity at that facility now to increase our fleet size and be able to provide that level of demand. So it's kind of like, catch-22, right? You want to bring more service in, but you don't really have a facility to accommodate these new vehicles. So that's something that we're really focused on moving forward. I'm happy that I can announce today because yesterday the Hillsborough County Board of County Commissions voted to give us matching funds to an FDOT grant, which was a block grant that we had already. And FDOT, Mingao and his team, they helped us to reprioritize those dollars towards the heavy maintenance facility. So that was a grant for $5 million a year for the next 5 years, it's $25 million. The county has voted yesterday to match at 15 million. So that would be around 3 million a year for the next 5 years. And then we're going to bridge the gap between contributions from HUD and the city of Tampa. So we have matching funds for the 25 million, which gets us 50 million. And then the TPO was willing to work with us on some of our work program dollars that were allocated to the State of Good Repair funds for bus and bus improvements to reallocate that toward the heavy maintenance facility. So, you know, right now I can say that we're in a pretty good shape as far as being able to have the funding required to go after federal grants, which we are in the process of submitting a grant on Friday for bus and bus improvement. And we'll be able to show that we have some local matching funds and also go after some federal funds to complete the cost of the project. So we are really working aggressively to find ways that we can do more with the dollars that currently are available. We are robbing Peter to pay Paul, and we recognize that because these aren't new dollars, they're existing dollars, and we're just reprioritizing them. So we'll be very aggressive in trying to find funding to pay Peter back, right? So yeah, so those, I would say those are the two big updates, you know, improving our frequency and then building a new heavy maintenance facility.
Great.
All right, well, I want to say hello, and it's nice to see you all after all this time. So just a couple of things that are going on in Hernando County. One is that I'm preparing right now our transit station study that will go out in a couple of months, working on that, and also the Rich Manor study, which is a underserved area on the east side of the county that we're looking maybe to do express route service to that area. Also, we're currently going on the construction phase for 27 bus stop locations. 2 of those are major locations. And that one, after that, we will have about 80% of our bus stops ADA accessible and a bench with benches or shelters. And we also received 2 new buses. So with that, the oldest buses on our fleet is about 6 years old. So we're very happy about that. Make the service reliable, people like it, people getting on board. And to be honest with you, although our ridership has decreased due to COVID, actually it wasn't that bad. It was only about 7%. So it wasn't that, people need the service, so they are riding it. So, and that's it for us.
Thanks, similar to what Natalie was saying, we have a number of 60-minute routes that are unacceptable.
Right.
So Tuesday, our board approved a matching to a service development grant for one of our neighborhood workforce routes and our biggest Title VI part of the service area. And interestingly, our county's going to use tax increment financing from the Southwest District, TIF district, for the local match for operating. So in 6 months, I've been involved with 2 board decisions to take our best route to 20 minutes and one of our, underdog routes to 30 minutes using some interesting different sources of funds. We have 3 other fixed routes, the 16, the 8, the 6, the 16, and the 8 that you would see on this list very soon. And that we want to also get to 30 minutes. And we're just looking for ways to do that. But we're also getting tested to implement some kind of mobility on demand in a high growth suburban area. And also in the same area where we just added service for Route 2. That's an area that's asking for, how can you connect us to daycare and after school? I got one kid here, one kid there. If you can help me with those trips, and then get me to your terminal, I'm riding you, you guys. So we're trying to figure out maybe a multi-stop type of MOD service, but possibly with TIF funding. Other than that, ridership is about 80% of normal, and we've heard the Canadians are coming back, so we expect, we kind of expect things to go back to normal. I won't pretend I know where COVID is, but between vaccine rates and booster shots and Canada opening up, we expect the tourism and then therefore some ridership to increase over this time last year. But I'd just like to say big thanks to Kurt for all his help and time and blood given to this committee, and appreciate what you've done. And I know you're doing great things up in Pasco. Good luck annexing those communities that we saw. But thanks for your time and keeping us out of trouble.
I appreciate that. I'm not leaving. I'm actually going for primary golfing is what is going to happen.
Okay.
But I will also be around every so often, and I still probably will listen in on the YouTube videos and so forth. One thing that Alan said is probably Peter to pay Paul. I think that is a tenet of transportation is how do you rob Peter to pay Paul, and then go back to Peter and pay Peter to drop off somebody else's things, Paul, and go back and forth on that. So Pasco basically had three things going forward. If you notice, I got a new shirt that says "Go Pasco." So we're no longer Pasco County Public Transportation PPP. We're now Go Pasco County Public Transportation. We just ordered. It's surprising when you have to order brand new bus signs. You don't realize how many bus stops you actually have around until you have to order the bus sign.
Right.
It's like it can be eye opening. So, but we are now Go Pasco, and I think it's a much needed step. We've been PCPP for about 25 years this year. And next year, it'll be the 50th anniversary of Pasco County providing transportation. So there'll be some more things coming forward and some more marketing campaigns to celebrate this milestone, this very nice milestone. I mentioned it before, we are about to release a study, finishing up the RFP process to get the last bit. The best way to say it is we're going with no preconceived notions for blowing up our system, because we've been running the same routes for about 25 years. And if you don't know it, Pasco County has changed rapidly, totally different in that 25 years. So we really need to start flexing to meet our citizens' needs. That's a huge step that we are moving forward. And then beyond that, I think it's just keep robbing Peter to pay Paul and maybe the needs day to day. I really like that. I really enjoyed being the chair for the last year or so. This is a great committee. I really enjoyed working with you, Brian, and Chris before you. And I know I'm gonna still see you around. So, but unless we have anything else for the committee, I'm willing to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And then at that point, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned.